In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, welcome everybody to this bonus edition of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. We're going to start calling these Andrew and Jerry Can't Wait because there's just too much going on in the world.
I can't wait, Andrew.
Yes, I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm still Jerry Rogers.
And it's funny because, you know, we've decided after now that we're back doing these things on a weekly basis, we need to do more of them. Because we do, you know, invariably, right? If you know this, if you spent any time listening to both me and Jerry, you know that we've mentioned this, that we talk, what, Jerry, at least once a day on the phone.
Well, at least once a day.
Sometimes
very often more than that.
And invariably, I will say to Jerry, or Jerry will say to me, we need to be having this conversation on the air. And it's funny, right? Because you've said in the past, well, we don't do show prep. Well, we're constantly doing show prep.
Well, because we're reading and thinking and talking and
more living. We're always talking to each other, and that's
right.
And that's the point. And so, you know, yesterday, because we do record this, and when we recorded with David Safavian, the Whoopi Goldberg thing hadn't even really happened as of yet. We tend to be ahead of the curve on a lot of news. We do, right, Jerry? Because you know, we have a thoughtful take on something, and that's we're able to size up a particular issue that's out there, like free speech or the Supreme Court or the Ukraine, and then something happens. So Whoopi Goldberg, you know, so Whoopi Goldberg goes and she says this thing on The View earlier this week. Do you want me to pull it up? Do I have to pull it up, Jerry?
Well, pull it up. But as you're doing that, I'll just, again, remind our listeners that she made the absolute ignorant, foolish, dumb, stupid statement that the Holocaust, the systematic murdering of Jews under Hitler had nothing to do with race. And it was, and she actually said this, she said, that was you all killing each other. And again, it's crazy ignorance for her not to understand the Holocaust. But
I know you're hearing that.
But also, it just goes to show you that she is part of the equity identity politics, and she sees everything with this intersectionality, right?
Well, so it's funny, right? Because, and here we go. I'm going to pull up the clip and play it. Let me do that. I know as I'm producing on the fly here. You go to share screen. All right. Oop.
About race.
There, here we go.
Let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No. It's not
no, and one of her colleagues, another idiot, agrees with her.
Race. Yeah. It's not about race.
Well, that's a good point,
because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah,
that's what it's about.
No, okay. So she says this, and is rightfully slammed for what is an incorrect statement. And it's funny because when the news broke, again, after Jerry and I had done a fantastic episode with David Safavian, which if you haven't listened to, Andrew and Jerry Save the Streets or watched, go and watch that. But Jerry and I were like, we didn't, you know, the reaction was, you know, okay, so what should happen to Whoopi Goldberg? Because, right, she made the statement and then she apologized. And then the question is, what should happen?
She offered a, what I thought reading it, a sincere apology via Twitter. The problem is she then went on to the Steve Colbert show and doubled down on her ignorance. But here's the thing. Before we get on to whether she should be fired, canceled, banned, and all the rest of it, it's important to understand how insidious this is.
Yes.
Again, it has to do with critical race theory and identity politics and intersectionality, where it's very important to the critical race theory, to the CRT advocates and intellectuals, they must redefine equity and equality and power. And so in this theory, in intersectionality, right, anyone with power cannot discriminate. They can't be victims because they have power. And you see, in Whoopi Goldberg's mind, Jews have power.
Yeah.
So therefore, since Jews have power, there's no way that the Holocaust was about race. There's no way that anti-Semitism is about race. No, of course not, because it has to be something that she sees. And it shows you how superficial and thin and ugly and fetish-like their thinking is on race.
Well, and it gets into, when you and I talked about this, and I pulled up something, a New York Times article about my old alma mater, my high school, not college, Fieldston, my high school. You and I had this discussion over whether or not we thought it was just plain ignorance on Whoopi Goldberg's part, or whether or not it was emblematic of something that had gone much deeper, right? Because there is this, if you don't understand anything about World War II and the Holocaust, World War II, pre-World War II, and the Holocaust, you might not understand that how the Nazis viewed Jews and the fact.
But why can't it be both at the same time?
Well, it can be. It certainly can be, Jerry.
Why don't you explain real quick the history here, the Nuremberg Laws, what Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf?
So the point is, and it's funny because I once again went and I rewatched, because I'm a masochist that way. I went and rewatched Conspiracy, which is the 2002 HBO docudrama. That's not even docudrama. It's a drama taken out of the Wannsee Conference, which was the gathering of high-level Nazi officials in Germany to essentially get buy-in from everybody on the extermination of the Jews and the debates that were happening at the time. And part of that was,
let me stop you there for a second. To get buy-in for the extermination of the Jews. That's exactly how you say it.
Because what happened is that at the Wannsee Conference, which wasn't a conference as we think about it, it was a meeting of high-level Nazi officials from various places in the government, organized by Reinhard Heydrich and why can't I think of his name? Played by Stanley Tucci in this movie. He was captured in Argentina. Anyway, set that aside for a second. The point is that the meeting was organized specifically because, as Reinhard Heydrich makes it clear to a number of officials, including Dr. Wilhelm Stuckart, who was the author of the Nuremberg Laws and was very concerned with what was being discussed at the Wannsee Conference, he wanted to make sure that there was unanimity amongst all of these officials moving forward. And so the idea was, so the Nuremberg Laws themselves essentially demarcated how you would classify various people depending on the degree of their Jewishness in German society, in Nazi German society, because you had a lot of mixed marriages or some mixed marriages. And
Adolf Eichmann.
Eichmann, of course.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Adolf Eichmann. And so Stuckart talks about this, and one of the points that he makes clear is that he says that these laws demarcated the Jews as part of our species, but not a part of our race, and we have to be. And he's talking about this, what this final solution as a way of sort of laying the case for why they were exterminating the Jews. You talk about Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil, which is this idea of you sort of let evil pass blithely by and it just sort of happens. This demonstrates that it was far more insidious than mere banality. Anyway, we're getting very far afield.
But again, just the bottom line very quickly. Yeah. Hitler's victims, the Holocaust, he saw them as in his words, right, a parasitic vermin, a parasitic race. He saw them as a race, as a subhuman race. He believed in racial purity, which is why he had to, and his goal was to eradicate Jews from the face of the earth.
Yeah, and so the initial Nuremberg Laws were about removing the Jews from German society, so they can no longer hold the positions of power that the Nazis claimed was out of proportion. Their influence was out of proportion to their population. But again, so if you don't understand this, I suppose it is very easy, especially as we have distilled down the concept of racism in these very general and not just ill-defined terms, but terms that have changed over time.
But it also goes, you're right. And what we've done with racism today is that you have these CRT advocates, these critical race theory advocates who will say ridiculous things like the racism today, the societal racism today that African Americans encounter in America is no different than it was 70 years ago. And the reason why they say that, and the reason why Whoopi Goldberg and what she says is so insidious, is that they view everything through power structure.
Yes.
And you have to be in the hierarchy of a certain victim, which is why CRT, critical race theory advocates, would say something like Asians, because they're powerful, because they have wealth, they are white adjacent.
Yes.
The same thing with Pakistanis and Asians, Indian Asians, where because they would say this, they would say people with wealth and power, they are the ones who are racist and they create victims.
And so this gets into this other part of the topic, which is that as part of this CRT philosophy. And I go back to, as I teed this up, talking about my high school. So my high school, the Fieldson School, is a very progressive school. They, a few years back, introduced this concept of racial affinity groups, which is, I want you to just think about this. So this is an elite and at the vanguard of progressivism in education. It's an ethical humanist school. The Society for Ethical Culture is a form of ethical humanism. And so the idea was you separate these students by race to allow them to be empowered by working in their race, and to talk about the issues of racism in the day. And so the question then became, well, what about Jewish students? Are Jewish students considered are they considered separate, or are they or are Jews allowed to hide in their own whiteness? And there is a philosophy, there is an idea that Jews can somehow, anyway, it perpetuates this kind of a cycle here of I'm not going to say the victimhood cycle, but again, when you view everything within this prism of skin color, then you get these very bizarre, skewed results.
And the thing is too, is it's only viewed through skin color insofar as it advances their power structure. Remember, CRT, they're a theorist. They use the term white adjacent.
Yes.
And so there are certain people groups like Asians who they don't consider victims, because they are actually a group with power that victimizes others.
Yeah,
it is an ugly way to look at human nature and humankind. But Absolutely. Let's get back to Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I think it's a combination of her ideology, of her ignorance, and therefore, if she offers up an apology, I think we should accept it. I think we should offer grace and charity and accept it.
But more to the point, right? Because again, now this gets into what happened with our friend Ilya Shapiro, and who we woke up
and Joe Rogan
and Joe Rogan, yes, of course. And we woke up on Monday morning to find that Ilya Shapiro was supposed to start his position at Georgetown. That position start date has been delayed while there's this investigation. And this
he's suspended.
Yes,
as he starts his job.
Yes,
and there can be
students are going to protest in this whole thing. The point is, Jerry and I both had the same reaction to the Whoopi Goldberg situation, which was in the same way that Ilya Shapiro said something and he apologized, and it was probably an ill-conceived notion that Ilya Shapiro should not have been suspended, and by the same token, Whoopi Goldberg should not have been suspended from The View. And there is something more important here, and this gets into what we're talking about, what we've talked about with Joe Rogan. Hold on. What we talked about with Joe Rogan, what we talked about with Gene Volokh, what we've talked about extensively over the last few weeks. Because the problem that arises when someone says something stupid and they speak honestly about their opinion, and their opinion may be wrong, and we punish them for it in this very, very overly punitive way, what it does is, once again, as we talk about the importance of the conversation, we are now creating a climate where people cannot say what's on their mind because they're afraid of saying something dumb and afraid of something that is saying something fundamentally wrong and being canceled for it. And again, the only way you can solve problems in this world is by having a discussion. And if you don't know what's on someone's mind because they feel afraid to speak out what they say, well, how can you possibly educate them? How can we possibly move forward as a society? Thank God, Jerry, hold on. Thank God Whoopi Goldberg said what she said. I don't agree with it.
Because now we know that she's ignorant of history, ignorant of the Holocaust, but also, more importantly, we know that her ideology is what keeps her in her ignorance.
Yes.
All right, but I want to say something about Ilya Shapiro, and that is, I don't agree. I don't think he said something stupid. I don't think he should have apologized. I think that what he said was perfectly relevant, given the language and the context of what the left puts forward. The left puts forward this false notion that we should choose someone for the Supreme Court based only on her race and on her gender. And what he said was, using their language and their ideology and reversing it back to them, that, well, if you do this and you exclude all these others, well, then you're going to get a lesser candidate.
Well, and more to the point, right? I think it could have been, personally, I think it could have been better worded. I understood what he was getting at, plus because I know Ilya Shapiro. But then you also have to remember, we're talking about Twitter. We're talking about
how many characters are you allowed?
You get now, I think it's 240 characters you now get. Characters, not words, 240 characters. So you're very limited in exactly what you can write. Now you can do multiple tweets in a row, as I did yesterday, advertising Andrew and Jerry Save the World, which if you're not subscribed to it, you really ought to be. But the point being that you are, so it lends itself to very inartful language and a very inartful way of doing these things.
But here's the thing. I'll throw it at you. I'll throw it at you, Andrew, and that is the Morning Joe show.
Yeah.
The co-host.
Oh, Micah Brzezinski.
Is it Micah or is it Mika?
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
She went off to say how terrible this is. We know Whoopi's heart, right? Now, here's the problem with the cancel culture. The left gives this broad benefit of the doubt. Well, we know Whoopi, we know her heart. Well, then there are myriad conservatives, or those who aren't even conservative, just those who say something that the power structures of the left don't like, and they immediately have to be banned or labeled. Joe Rogan is a Bernie Sanders supporting left of center person who is the attempts to ban him, or at the very least to put labels on him, has everything to do with power structure. And I look, I think that,
hey Jerry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just think it's a mistake. If you make a legitimate mistake, apologize, like Whoopi.
Yes.
I don't think, though, if you did nothing wrong except offend the virtue signalers and the snowflakes, I think apologizing to the mob is always a mistake.
Well, listen, and because you've seen what happened when Ilya Shapiro he apologized to the mob, right? And it's never enough. It doesn't. It in the end, it's never enough.
The Redskins, dealing with race. The Redskins announced this week when we were off air yesterday. They announced that their new name is going to be the Commanders.
The Commies, the Washington Commies.
Well, again, it's a ridiculous name. They waited a year to announce this. It's a bad name. The Commies. Let's go Commando. It's just in every way stupid. But here's the thing, and I called you yesterday to say this.
Yes.
The Washington Post had a guest opinion.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Right? Had an op-ed.
That was the other thing I wanted to talk about.
From a Native American advocate who said, too little, too late.
Change anything.
What are we supposed to care? It doesn't change it. Doesn't change a thing.
And I pointed out to Jerry that if someone had written that at the height of all of this, that person would have been canceled. Right? Again, it is, it's so funny. I'm reminded of the concept in the Passover Seder. The concept of Dayenu. Have you ever heard this? I don't know if you've ever been to a Seder, Jerry, but it's a word in Hebrew and essentially means it would have been sufficient. It would have been enough. If God had done this, it would have been sufficient. If he'd just let us out of Egypt, if he'd just done this, and this is almost like the anti-Dayenu. It's never enough. It's nothing is ever sufficient enough. When the mob is frothing at the maw, and they want to put somebody up on the yardarm, it's never enough. But this gets into this is the danger, and there are two dangers here. There is the danger that the left does and people on the right do, which is to try to make a value judgment about the sufficiency of someone's apology. The idea of peering into somebody's heart, that's always a dangerous, always a very dangerous place to go. But the other danger here is the victory lap that people take over Whoopi Goldberg being suspended because of a tit for tat thing.
Our side, right?
But yes. Remember that they are suspending Whoopi Goldberg to set a standard by which everybody else ought to be judged. The sort of it's a very dangerous place to be, right? Because Whoopi Goldberg said the dumb thing, she apologized. People still, if the left is to be believed, we understand what her heart was like. Yet, despite all of this stuff, we're still going to suspend her for 2 weeks. That is a really dangerous place for a society to be in. That even if, it feeds into this idea of you can't say something stupid. Now, listen, I'm going to say something, Jerry.
No. I think people on the left say stupid things all the time. Whoopi's the exception that proves the rule.
Well, yes, the whole double standard thing. Yeah, I agree with that. But I'm going to say something because you can't say this because you're still on the air. But I'm going to say this because I'm no longer on the air. I would get cautioned about things I could talk about on the air and the way I could talk about it on the air. And, in the wake of my friend Chad Dukes being fired again for something he said on a podcast, again, the cancel culture was out there. It is something that happens. It is something that happens. Now, Chad was on a sports station, so it's a little different. But the point is, the pressures are there, even on a supposedly center-right station. I didn't say the name of the station, did I, Jerry? Good.
You did not.
I'm not going to say the name of the station. But the tone policing that is out there. Now, you know me. All of you know me. I'm a rational guy. I am someone who, because of my background and experience, speaks from the heart and speaks in a very balanced and even-handed and level-headed approach to things. But this is the era in which we are in which someone can say something objectively stupid, and because you have, in certain instances, corporate masters who are deathly afraid of their phony baloney jobs, that they will express caution. And you know something, as I've said, what it leaves you with very few exceptions, of which my co-host is one of really, really, really bad radio. Anyway, that was not the point of my rant.
No, but this is the thing. Look, and you and I are remarkably consistent because,
yes,
again, I've always believed that that if you apologize sincerely, the second chance, reconciliation, I believe in it. I find it very interesting, though, that, you know, and I'm going to pick on him because he's such a sellout. David French, right?
Yep.
Former National Review. He's at the Dispatch now. He's at Time Magazine. When Roseanne Barr was canceled for whatever ridiculous thing she said, whatever toxic thing she said, and she apologized.
Yep.
David French had no problem with her being canceled. Today he writes, or yesterday he writes on Twitter, shouldn't apologies count for something? Given that we're all imperfect, we should want a society where contrition meets forgiveness. I agree with David French, but my point is that, and my point to the Morning Joe cast of characters and others, is that you can't all of a sudden find religion. This is a principle that should be in place. If someone says something and it's wrong and they apologize, I think we need to move on. And to your point, when we started this program, we have to give people the ability to kind of think out loud.
Absolutely, 100% without a doubt.
Yes. I mean, otherwise we're going to have stifle conversations. We won't have the exchange of ideas, and we won't find the solutions needed for the many problems that we face.
And by the way, so Roseanne Barr was fired for racist tweets about Valerie Jarrett's appearance.
That's right. So yes.
Again, it's neither here nor there. It's not directly related.
Right.
The conversation. Here's what we know. And I've said this a couple of times. As I said on the Tuesday show, had a conversation with my wife after watching the VP for communications at Substack get attacked on Twitter over Substack's approach to free speech on their platforms. We are at a very dangerous point in our society, a very strange place, and it's a place where when I speak about my worry, I speak about it because I know what happens. Listen, we want to go back to Nazi Germany and talk about these things. We know what happens in Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, any totalitarian society in which you cannot speak out, in which the bad thing that is being done in the world is incumbent upon making sure that you get forced buy-in from folks around you.
Well, right? and our very present trouble is in need of speaking out. When we talk about these COVID restrictions and mask mandates, whether we should get 2-year-olds vaccinated now. I mean, we should be having conversations about the science, the data, and the evidence. But the problem is that you bring on an expert. You and I could bring in somebody who is lettered, who has a pedigree that is second to nobody. And if he says something that the current narrative against the current narrative, well, then we're banned or canceled.
That's right, Jerry. I mean, I could bring on and have a conversation, for instance, with the editor of the most read website aggregator of public health news in America. I can have a conversation with him, and he speaks openly and honestly about what he's been reading, and all of a sudden that video can be canceled.
Well,
by
listen,
YouTube.
Folks, right now, if Andrew and I go in a certain direction when it comes to vaccines and their effectiveness, or we have a conversation about cloth masks and their effectiveness, YouTube could just cancel the video.
And more to the point, once you get that mark and you get, beyond a warning, and you get your 3 strikes, you're out.
Right.
And that's certainly something that Jerry and I have talked about.
And again, I'll just close my thought here. And that is, remember, a lot of what was considered science just 6 months ago, there is new data, new evidence. And here's the thing. I was talking to a former high-ranking government official yesterday. in the healthcare field. I do that because I'm the editor at Real Clear Health. And he was telling me that the CDC is in crisis. And how do we fix it? And my response to him was transparency.
Yes.
Admit mistakes. Don't overhype the issue or the problem. Allow for a discourse. Don't demonize. Don't demonize those who want to have a broader conversation. Trust the American people. And guess what? The American people will reward you and trust you back.
This is going beyond the speech issue, right? Which is, and this is bound up in it. We have to reignite the right to be wrong.
Yes.
And that's right. What is it? We make the complex conversational.
Right.
You have to
allow people the freedom to talk openly, and they might misspeak, they might say the wrong thing, they might make a mistake, they might be wrong. Listen,
it's funny. Hold on.
Imagine if we never let our children have a conversation with us where they might say the wrong thing or be wrong about something. And it's, how do you teach them?
That's exactly it. And part of this is taking a moment of glee when someone does this. It's funny because I had a friend post on Facebook a picture that was supposedly from a deep space telescope of the moon passing in front of the Earth, and part of the caption of it was a statement that the moon does not rotate. Now I know that is not true. The moon does rotate, and I don't want to get into the whole science here. The point is, I because this person is someone who's interested in science, I wanted to say something, but I had to think for a moment about whether or not I really wanted to issue this kind of a correction and how I wanted to do it. Because, again, we are in this culture where people are afraid to be wrong, and they see any kind of a correction as some kind of personal attack.
It's funny you say that because, I have a 7-year-old. Liam is 7. Yeah. And he wants approval. He wants his sisters to approve of him. He wants his mom and dad. And there are times when I have to correct him, and it's as if his world is ending. Yes. And I'm trying to explain to him, I love you. This is my job. And I not that I came down heavy on him or even raised my voice, but just simple corrections. He's so upset that he's wrong. And I actually said to him yesterday, because I went to basketball practice with him yesterday, and there were a couple of things that he was doing. I corrected, like a dad would, and lovingly did it. I'm very proud. I'm so proud of you. Hey, consider this. And he was really upset by it. I said, Liam, I said, you have to give me the freedom as your dad to be able to help you and teach you.
Absolutely.
And again, I hope that you can understand how a 7-year-old mind works, but for grownups and for major organizations and science-based and health-based organizations, not to want to have a conversation over ideas is dangerous.
I think at the end of the day, right. And listen, we could have a lengthy conversation about the I'm not going to even say the dumbing down of America, but the concept of participation trophies and how this might feed into this. I think at the end of the day,
listen to Kid Rock's new song.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, Jerry, when we look back, however long this project goes, Andrew and Jerry Save the World, Andrew and Jerry Can't Wait. I think when we look back on the breadth of our shows together, that's what's going to come out of it. And that this idea of the importance of the conversation, and the importance of the conversation in solving problems, and the importance of the conversation in moving along, and part and parcel of that is recognizing that people have that right to be wrong. Jerry, listen. Sorry, go ahead. Final thoughts.
Only because you're so smart.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jordan Peterson was on with Joe Rogan recently.
Yep.
And he talked about the conversation. And essentially, he said the conversation is also something that helps us keep our humanity.
100%.
Yeah. And without the conversation, I'll say this to you. I said it yesterday or 2 days ago when we did our show. When the Puritans came to America, the first thing they built wasn't a church, wasn't a barn. It was a pub, a public house. Why? Because the importance of conversation.
Listen, and this is sort of my closing thought on this. Not that I think that commercials should guide us, but remember a couple of years back, there was that Heineken commercial, and it was, they built a makeshift bar. I think it was Heineken. Excuse me. They built a makeshift bar in like a warehouse, wherever they were filming this commercial. And two people came in and they didn't know each other, and they were handed a beer and they just had a conversation. And it turned out that they were on wildly different pages from each other, politically, socially, whatever. And that's the point in the end, is that you have to have these conversations without any preconceived notions about the other people. All of these things are
Andrew, you and I are old enough to remember having conversations and having friendships with people who did not or do not agree with us.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
me.
I mean, again, I know we're closing out here, but I remember years ago when I taught at Iona, there's one of the teachers, her first name was Liz, and she was a hippie, leftover kind of hippie from the 60s, 70s. And she was all about peace and love and all the rest of it. And was a very anti-establishment, anti-church even. And I loved her company. And I was a square, young, conservative. I even wore the uniform with the blue blazer and the khaki pants. Sure. And she and I were great friends. And again, that's just one example.
I had a thought the other day. I remember a distinct conversation with one of my best friends growing up, a guy that I had been in nursery school with. And until we stopped talking as a result of the Trump nomination, we can talk about it. We need to dedicate a show to how Trump broke America in that way. And I don't mean that in a good way. I'm not taking glee about it. I remember having a conversation in my kitchen. This had to be in the late 80s, when we were having a debate in America over whether or not there should be a constitutional amendment to outlaw burning the flag. And he was a staunch defender of the First Amendment and free speech, and was aghast at this. And there were things that I knew then and things that I didn't know then, right? I was 16, 17 years old. And I said, well, I think that I think that we shouldn't. I said then, I don't believe this now. I said, well, if you are burning the flag of America, you shouldn't enjoy the comforts of the freedoms that America provides. Now, I don't agree with that now. I want to be really clear about that. I know I've just said that. And he and I went back and forth and debated and discussed this. And in point of fact, he was very right. I am very much, and it was probably within a few years that I became the free speech absolutist that I am. But I wondered the other day about that conversation and what that friend would think about what's happening in the world today, about what's happened with Joe Rogan and Spotify, and what's happening. Probably isn't thinking much about Ilya Shapiro, but what's going on with Whoopi Goldberg and what she had to say. And I'm wondering if he is still the free speech absolutist. As I said, I haven't had a conversation with him in more than 5 years. The last anyway, I won't get into the last conversation.
Let me ask you this question as we close out and as we conclude. I feel like a pastor. And in conclusion,
yes.
But also another big item that happened yesterday is Jeff Zuckerberg. No,
Jeff Zucker.
Jeff Zucker. Yes. Sorry, Jeff Zucker forced to resign. And here's my take on that, just real quick. And I said to my daughter Bridget yesterday, Jeff Zucker,
president of CNN,
right, that he was having an affair with the chief vice president, of communication,
of marketing,
at CNN, but she was someone who was very much involved as communications director for the Andrew Cuomo administration in New York City. And I thought to myself, and I said this to my daughter, this is the problem and why we trust Joe Rogan more than we trust CNN. And that is because it's so connected, the politics to the personal, and they have relationships. And think about everything, how CNN covered Andrew Cuomo during the COVID and how they made him, Cuomo-sexuals, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
And it turns out that, I mean, my goodness, I mean, the head of the network is sleeping with the former head of communications for the governor.
Yes. And, it's funny because there have been these lists that have been published from time to time about the nature of the relationship between people who are inside the branches of government and people.
George Stephanopoulos, what's his name?
It was even
Chuck
more
Todd.
During the Obama administration. I mean, I remember the list coming out about the senior White House officials who were all in relationships with folks who were at the top of the major media.
How does this fit in with your free speech? How did you phrase it?
Free speech absolutism.
Absolutism. If you are someone who is coming out of an administration or a political office, Congress, whatever, it doesn't make a difference, a political office, that you are banned, like the lobbying ban, that you're banned to go into a network.
I'm not a big fan of banning, right? I go the other way, which is the idea of disclosure, as you've been talking about, which is this idea. Now, I suppose somebody could have done the research, and the problem, of course, is that then CNN will cast aspersions on whoever's doing the research, and I'll offer up a story in a second.
Right.
But this idea of, I didn't bring my water with me today, that's why I'm coughing. But right, if someone had reported that Jeff, it didn't even have to be Jeff Zucker's girlfriend, paramour, whatever, but the fact that the vice president of marketing for CNN was the former communications director for Governor Andrew Cuomo, I mean, that's something that should be disclosed.
Yes.
Here's the problem, of course, is, Jerry, that we're no longer teaching ethics in journalism anymore. We've talked about this on the show. Or maybe you and I have talked about it personally. Sometimes those conversations blur, but right. The idea, we talked about it with regard, I know we're going much longer than I thought we were going to today, but right, where you had the story a couple of weeks ago that NPR reported that
yes.
Justice Gorsuch and Justice Sotomayor was staying away from the high court because Justice Gorsuch had refused to wear a mask in contravention of the orders of the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts. And NPR reported this, but never took the time to actually call any of those three offices
right.
and get comment on this, which is a bedrock principle of professional journalistic ethics. And as I said to you, Jerry, I don't think I said it on the air, I was crosswise in this. I don't remember how many years ago it was when an NPR affiliate in Virginia did a story about me and the work that I was doing with Institute for Liberty, and they never called me for comment.
Yeah,
I didn't even know the story was being done until I started getting a flurry of phone calls from family members who happen to hear it.
Yeah.
Or I'll give you another example. Several examples. New York Times reporter asking me for an interview under topic X, or MSNBC asking me for an interview on topic X, and then switching the topics on you, when you're on the air.
Or the myriad times when they interview someone and then only use snippets and cut it up. And so, this happens all the time.
Yeah, and so this is my point, is that journalistic ethics are very much out the window. And because because we are in this era of advocacy journalism. So instead of teaching journalistic ethics in a journalism school in America, every reporter is now being taught how to be a political advocate for whatever cause they believe in.
And you mentioned his name earlier, and again, my last thought is that, and we saw journalists, not ex-politicos who have become journalists, but journalists made the point in 2016 that they had to do everything in their influence, in their power, to make sure Donald Trump is driven from office.
100%.
So journalism really is dead again, which is why the Joe Rogan podcast, the Andrew and Jerry Save the World podcast, and other such exchanges of ideas really are the future of public discourse.
There we go. Listen, Jerry, let's leave it there because we were supposed to go a half hour.
Yes.
We've gone just under 50 minutes here. Next week we're gonna have a brand new show. We're gonna do an Andrew and Jerry Can't Wait later on.
And I might have an announcement next week in terms of a Real Clear podcast. So I'll say it now. There might be a
no. Save it for next week.
Okay,
hold on to it until it happens.
Next week, all right.
Don't jinx it. Jerry, I know you want to tell people to plant their feet. How do they plant their feet?
Find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless you.
Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.